This video is going to explain how to do the Autodesk Inventor dimensioning introduction assignment. If we take a look at the instructions, it says start a 2D sketch and make the shapes shown. Then use the dimension tool to replicate the exact dimensions shown in the example pictures. Then take screenshots and post them in the appropriate box. Please crop images so that they look exactly like the sample image. So if we take a look at the table here, there is the task list on the left. There is the description of what it is that you are creating, an example screenshot that also has the dimensions, and your screenshot, or space for your screenshot. Now I understand that some of these numbers can be hard to read, so what I recommend doing is to go the magnification, up the magnification as high as it'll go, which is to 200%. Sometimes you can also on your keyboard go Control plus and you can make it a little bigger, but I already have it as big as it'll go right now. So for me this is perfectly legible. I could even make it smaller and still read it, so hopefully for you guys you can read it as well. Alright, so what I have to do is I have to create a rectangle, which you should already know how to do because you should have already completed the sketching assignment before you do the dimensioning. It's kind of an order of things. You sketch it, you dimension it, and put in constraints. All right, if we look at the top here, there's a dimension between the two sides of the rectangle of 0.550 inches, and it is inches because that's default for this program. The height of this is 1.1 inches. And one thing I want to pay attention to is the arrows. So there's a number with some lines, the arrows, and then some reference lines down to the object itself. What this is telling you is that from the tip of the first arrow to the tip of the second arrow is exactly 0.550 inches. The lines that go vertical are just extensions of the object so that you know exactly what it is pointing to. So this is one dimension, 0.550. The same thing is going on with the dimension on the right. The tip of one arrow to the tip of the other arrow is exactly 1.1 inches away. Now let's go ahead and recreate this. So I'm going to draw a rectangle and then I'm going to use the dimension tool. I'm going to get rid of this old part. I'm not going to save changes. I'm going to open up a new part. I'm going to start a sketch. Choose any plane, really doesn't matter. I like to start working in quadrant 1 generally. So I know the shape is somewhere around like that. And if you look over in the middle of this toolbar, you have the dimension tool. So the best way to use the dimension tool is to click where you want the arrows to point. So if you look, I click those two lines and I have this 0.314 because that's the current size of this, and the arrows don't change no matter where I put them. I could go all the way up or all the way down. For the purposes of this assignment, I want you to replicate the general area where I put my arrows. It's important when you're dimensioning things to not have too many things overlap and confuse the person looking at them. So you want to kind of spread out and space out your dimensions. I click again with my mouse and then it opens up the screen where I can type this number in, 0.550. And it makes it a little larger. Sometimes it changes it so much to where it looks like you've lost it. But in reality, all it did was it made it bigger or smaller depending on the magnification you were at on your screen at that time. So just use the rubber wheel, the little wheel on your mouse, and it is a zoom tool. So it will zoom in or out wherever your cursor is. So put your cursor over your toolbar. And then you can also pan things around the screen by holding that mouse roller down and moving it around. Okay, so I have my 0.550. Now, like I said, the best way is to click the lines itself that you want your arrows to point to and dimension in between. But there is also another way of doing this on simple geometry, which is to click the line itself and it gives you the same result. But I want you to be aware that when you have more complex geometries, sometimes this does not give you the actual dimension that you need, and you have to click one line to another. In fact, one line to another where you want your two arrows pointing is always the better way to go, but on simple things you can just click the line. And this was 1.1 inches, click enter. Now if you put the wrong dimension in, it's very simple to go back and change it. When you have the dimension tool selected, you can just double click it and change it again. Click enter or hit the check mark and it changes it there. For number one, this is all I need. Now for number two, I get a question a lot about where are those other lines pointing. Let's go back to that worksheet real quick. So number 2 is a very similar object. It's just a square, but there's 2 more dimensions referencing, it looks like this little yellow dot. So this little yellow dot is what I like to call the center of our CAD universe. This is the origin. This is the center point of all the axes, the X, Y, and Z axes. It serves as what I like to refer to as an anchor point. If this rectangle or this square was drawn on a piece of paper and I needed to fasten it to the wall, this would be my wall. This would be my reference point. If you notice, this object is black, and we'll talk about why here in a sec. So right now, this object is purple. And the reason it's purple is because it's missing information. I can still move it around. I can manipulate it because it knows the size of this rectangle, but it doesn't know where this rectangle is supposed to be in this CAD universe. And if you look down on the bottom right, it says 2 dimensions needed. What it's telling me is, I see this rectangle. You can move it around because I don't know where it's supposed to be, where it's supposed to end up, where it's supposed to live. So what I have to do is use dimensions to tell it. I could also use constraints, but right now we're talking about dimensions. So per that sheet, there was a dimension that went from this dot to this line. And if you see here, I have my same arrows and it only moves up and down. So essentially, I'm adding a left to right or an X dimension as far as where this is supposed to live. And I can't remember, but for our purposes, I'm just going to put 750. So now the 2 vertical lines turn black because I gave it a finite place where this rectangle has to lie left to right or in the X axis. But I still don't know where it's supposed to live, where it's supposed to, be fastened essentially up and down, because this constraint alone is not enough. What I have to do is I have to put another dimension in, this time from the bottom line, or I could use the top line too, but the example, use the bottom, to the origin or center point. And then again, I can put this anywhere essentially, but for clarity's sake, for simplicity, I like to put it over here. And I believe that was 0.500. So now the 2 purple lines turn black because essentially this rectangle can't go anywhere. I have given it a definite place in this CAD universe where it has to be, and it can't move anywhere, hence it's black. And it's also, the screen says fully constrained on the bottom right. If I look over here at the sketch, there's a little push pin in that now, which means this is a fully constrained sketch. And fully constrained is always what we want to achieve, so that things can't be moved or changed at some point on us. Everything has a finite place where it has to be. And like I said, there's 3 ways it shows that everything is black. You can confirm that on the bottom right of the screen where it says fully constrained. And if it wasn't fully constrained, it would say one piece of information needed, 2 pieces of information needed. You can see if I delete that, it says 1 dimension needed, but I'm going to undo that deletion. So you're going to take a screenshot of this with the snipping tool, and you're going to put that in the appropriate place. I don't think I have to demonstrate that, but I'm going to do it real quick. So snipping tool, new, capture all the information, go to your worksheet. And I actually did number 2, right? I kind of combined number 1 and 2. But make sure for your purposes that you do both separately, or do one first and then the other. Now this is pretty close, but I can take just a few seconds and I can size this a little more appropriately to match what I'm given here. So as you can see, here's my version in the box, about the right size. It's nice and uniform, looks good. That is how you do the rest of these. So all you're doing is you're adding in more dimensions essentially. Now there is one dimension I want to point out here, which is this arc. So once you do an arc, if you want to get this angular dimension, there's 3 things you have to click. Number 1 is one of the 2 endpoints. So here's the 2 endpoints of the arc, and here's the center point. You have to click an endpoint, the center point, and the other endpoint, and it will give you this angular dimension. You could also go backwards and click this endpoint, this center point, and this endpoint. That would achieve the same result. The rest of these are all just very basic dimensions. Here's another angular one with the same process: endpoint, center point, endpoint. Here are it's just added complexity by having more sketch elements and more dimensions. But this will prepare you for what we're going to get into next, which is more physical objects, extrusions, things like that. So that's how you do this assignment. Thanks.